Today we're in Holy Rosary College and we're with 6 students, and they're going to be talking with Michael Martin and his family of blacksmiths from the Ballygar area. And you're very welcome, Michael.
Thanks very much.
So who are we going to be chatting about today?
Well, I suppose the closest to me in terms of my family would be my 2 uncles, were John Kelly, was a blacksmith in just outside Ballygar, and his brother Dan worked with him, but did more of the farming than the blacksmith work. So they were farmers, blacksmith and farmers. But their father then was Michael Kelly. He was my grandfather. He was a blacksmith. It was he set up the forge in outside Ballygar. So I suppose maybe to go back to where he started out. He was born in Newbridge, just at the back of the church in Newbridge, a place called Newgrove, and he went to work with Pat Fitzmaurice in Ballygar, who had a forge and who was a blacksmith. Now, blacksmith was a person who worked with iron, and who also, by and large, they also looked after the shoeing of horses. So when a horse needed new shoes or to have shoes replaced, it was the blacksmith. They were known as farriers, but blacksmiths and farriers were interchangeable. They basically did the same thing. But my grandfather, when he was born about I can give you exact figures, but it was around 1875 or something like that. Now, it's a long time ago. So let's.
It is a long time ago.
It shows my own age as well, doesn't it? But anyway, in 1901, when you were looking for information, where were people? Do you want to find out where people lived in 1901? You look at the census of Ireland in 1901. That's on the internet. Get that quite easily. And he was actually recorded twice in 1901. He was recorded as living at home in Newbridge, but he's also recorded as living with the Fitzmaurices in Ballygar, in the town of Ballygar. Now, how did he come that he worked with the Fitzmaurices? Well, it so happens that his aunt was married to Pat Fitzmaurice. So she was Bridget Branley. She married Pat Fitzmaurice, and they had a forge in the town of Ballygar.
So they offered him the apprenticeship then?
They would obviously, it was an ideal place for him to go to learn his apprenticeship. Now, why was the forge there? Well, Pat Fitzmaurice, where you look at where the forge is in Ballygar, it's at this near end of the town. Any of you that might pass through Ballygar, there's a little square there at the end of the town. You can pass by now and miss it. It's on your as you come in, it's on your left-hand side, known as Victoria Square. Now, Victoria Square was probably named after Queen Victoria way back, but it was a significant little area because there was before the trains and before the buses and cars and all this gear, people, if they were travelling long distances, say from Dublin to Galway or whatever, how did they travel? Travel by coach, and the coach had stops along the route from Dublin or from wherever they were going. Various stops along the route where the horses were taken and rested and changed.
Stage coaches, they were called.
And Victoria Square was one of those staging posts. The coaches were run by a guy called Bianconi, who was an Italian guy who set up a whole series of coach stations and services throughout Ireland. Now, you're talking about railway, so that'd be what, let's say the 1850s or before that,
just after the famine.
After the famine, and before trains because trains were a more recent development. So there was probably a forge there to go with that, because the horses were being brought there. The horses had to be changed and had to be looked after, and if they lost their shoe or whatever. But anyway, Pat Fitzmaurice and his wife, they lived there. My grandfather went to work there, and he stayed there up to 1901. Then he decided to emigrate. So he went off to America, like so many people did. Now, he was the third in a family of 12. There was 12 children in the family. He was the third. In those times, the eldest son usually took over, stayed to look after the farm, and then the rest of the family had to go. So he the eldest son was Matthew Kelly. He stayed to look after the farm. His second son was Tom Kelly. He went to America. The third son was Michael Kelly. He went to America. And the fourth son was John Kelly. He went to America. So the next two were two girls. They stayed and lived, married locally. But the rest, quite a lot of the rest of the family finished up in America. Michael Kelly, my grandfather then, went to work as a blacksmith in America. And where he finished up was in Boston, or in the state of Massachusetts, I should say. But he finished up living with, or working with, a man named Quinn. I think his name was Martin Quinn. I get the Quinn names mixed up a bit at times. But he finished up working with this Quinn man as a farrier, as a blacksmith in America. The Quinn man was from right beside where I was born in Ballygar. Our next door neighbours were Kilroys, but in actual fact, going back to 1901 and back there, that was a Quinn family home, and they were blacksmiths. So if you look around Ballygar, way back in 1855, when you could look up the census or the Griffiths valuation for 1855, there was at least three different Quinns had forges in the area of Ballygar. So there was a kind of a family tradition of blacksmithing in the area. But Michael Kelly went to work, and I'm sorry, I mixed up.
You're all right. You're all right.
Well, when he went to America, he finished up not with the Quinn. Sorry, my mistake there now. He finished up with a Thomas Martin, working for a Thomas Martin for a short period of time. Thomas Martin was, as it so happens, my granduncle. But the Michael Kelly was of my mother's side of the family. Thomas Martin was my father's side of the family. So there was a connection there long before my mother and father married. So that was the...
to just show you how intertwined the blacksmiths are. They all looked out and minded one another all the time.
Thomas Martin was the person that worked with... Sorry, I got mixed up there. Thomas Martin was the man that worked with the Quinn, Martin Quinn. But anyway, Michael Kelly then went to work in the whole Boston and Rhode Island area. Rhode Island is one of the states. It's one of the smallest states in America. You have 50 states?
Yeah.
In the United States of America. And one of the small ones is Rhode Island. It's very close to Boston, in that what they call the New England area. And it was also a great area for people building big mansions and houses where massive, really huge places, because you had some very, very wealthy people in America in that time. And one of the families that were particularly wealthy over there at that time were the Vanderbilts, Vanderbilt. The Vanderbilt family made their money on railroads, building railroads and shipping, and they were extraordinarily wealthy. So my grandfather finished up working for the Vanderbilts as a blacksmith for the Vanderbilts. Now, the Vanderbilts were so wealthy that they were into race horses. So they went to, at one stage, they brought horses from London, came to Europe, bought race horses, obviously for breeding purposes and so on, brought them back to Rhode Island. And there's a record of my grandfather being on a ship as looking after horses with a number of other people, taking them from London to Rhode Island in, I think it was 1907. So that was the sort of area.
And have you the document for that?
I have the actual.
Just to be able to put that into their project.
I have the actual.
The census of it. Yeah, ship record. Yeah.
they finished up. He finished up working with the Vanderbilts, and he left. He was later. Then he moved to Boston. Now this is all between 1901. I reckon he left Ireland just after maybe around the middle of 1901.
Yeah.
I think I have a record of him about May 1901. So he happened to be in the census because the census was taken a few months earlier. But then 1901, he went to America, and he worked with he got employment with, first of all, with Thomas Merton, and then moved on to work with the Vanderbilts, or for the Vanderbilts, or whatever. Then he moved to Boston. He moved to Boston, and he was in Boston then when a number of particularly of his sisters emigrated. He was there in Boston. His name is on the list. Who are you going? Who when you were on the ship, you had to say where you were going to in America.
The ship's manifest.
Manifest, and said, right, I'm going to Michael Kelly, a place called Dana Court in Boston. No, anyway, he decided and I don't know why, but luckily he decided that he was going to come back to Ireland. So he came back to Ireland probably about 1910, 1911. And he married my grandmother. Now, my grandmother was the youngest of 4 in a family. She was Coleman. Her name was Ellen Coleman. She had 2 brothers. One who was in the RIC, and he had health problems, and he died. And then the other brother obviously went to England. He joined the army over there, and really we don't exactly know what happened to him.
First World War, possibly. Yeah. But
anyway, my grandmother was the one person who was left in to take over the small farm in just outside Ballygar, and she married Michael Kelly. And Michael Kelly, when he came back from America, the farm was very, very small. He decided to set up a forge. So that forge is just outside Ballygar. Emma went down to see you.
They're the ones, the photographs I was showing you earlier on, and we're lucky enough to have the old photo of the cartwheel, they were doing with the turf I was showing you earlier.
Yeah.
If I can, I might try and get you down at some stage so you can see where it is,
There isn't much there other than just what you see in the photograph. It's
just that they could see where he had it placed. It's brilliant.
The old photograph that thought that was the colour photograph.
Yeah.
That's a great photograph.
Oh, super photo.
Where it came from, but it's absolutely, it tells you a whole story.
It does. And it's one of probably the only one. We've loads of blacksmiths doing the farrier end of it, shoe and horses. Sorry, but we've none of them with the wheel.
That's
and
right,
that shows you the turf then and the circle, and the 2 boys needed to do the cartwheel. So it's a really important photo, and we're very lucky to have it now in the project.
So they came back. They came back there to now that where the site of that forge is at the junction of 6 roads, isn't it? About 6 roads.
6 roads. Yeah.
And how he happened to be there was his uncle owned the land, and he bought the land from his uncle, or got the land from that particular site from his uncle, who lived just up the road from him there. So there's a kind of story there as well. But that's the forge that he came back to, and he set up a forge there. He has.
In many years, Michael, do you think he would have been there now?
He would have been there probably from they married in 1912.
Yeah.
Now. He died in 52.
And was there anyone to take over then after?
Oh, there was, yeah.
His son?
My mother, in his family then, Ellen Coleman and Michael Kelly married, and they had 2 sons. First, 2 eldest were 2 sons, and then 5 daughters. Just get my numbers right now, but yes, there was May, my mother, and Delia, and Ellie, and Katie. Yeah, 5 in the 5. So there was 7 in the family. So his son then, John Kelly, who is in that photograph. He's the man on the right hand side. If you remember the photograph, outside the forge. That's my.
Let's see, I'll show it to them here now.
You can pass it around there.
So that's him here in the photo.
He became the. He took over.
He took over in the 1950s.
He would have, or even before that.
And when did it?
They were born. John and them were born in the mid 1910s.
Yeah.
So let's say
they're in their 40s. There, probably 50s.
John was probably involved in it from 1920, maybe certainly from 1930, even before 1930.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did it dwindle off then, Michael?
I don't know. I can't.
Would it be the 70s probably when the machinery started coming in the 60s and?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. See, I moved away from Ballygar in.
There's a lot of the times that time it kind of went okay in the 60s and was dwindled in the 70s, and in the 80s then the 80s then they kind of closed up. You know?
Oh yeah, no, he would. They wouldn't. I'd say. I doubt if they were operating in the 80s at all. No.
So 70s sometime.
70s, yeah. It would be more
slowed up.
Well, you see, you think of what the sort of work they were doing.
Yeah.
One was shoeing horses, donkeys, jinnets, whatever animals had to be shod, putting shoes on them. That's the process in itself. It's very interesting.
Michael, you said a thing there, jinnets. Would you know what that is?
No,
you might have to explain that one to them.
It's a cross between a donkey and a horse.
Sometimes an ass, or there's other names on them as well. But yeah.
They would have operated. No, the sort of work they were doing then would be one with the work of a farrier, which is while shoeing horses and looking after the shoes. So you have a metal. You know what a horseshoe is. Shape of a horseshoe. That they would make those, and then they would fit those onto the hoof of the horse. And if a horse lost a shoe, it would have to be replaced. And it goes on. They're still being done because only people dealing with race horses. Oh, they are, of course.
Race horses. It's still farriers are still going.
Still farriers are going, but they'll probably go around now in vans and have guests and all sorts of stuff. In that time, the forge. What you had inside, you had the key part of it was that you had a fire inside, usually with coal,
specialised coal,
and you had a bellows, which meant that they could blow the air through the fire and really make it really, really, really hot, so they could make the iron.
They knew by the colour of the fire and the iron where it was when it's been melted. You know, they got used to where that.
They'd know
experience by the colour.
And then they had the other piece of equipment that was kind of central to the forge after the bellows was the anvil, which was a very huge lump of iron, but with a particular shape on it, so they could use it to shape whatever piece of metal they were working with, whether it was a horseshoe or it might be manufacturing a gate.
They were lucky enough with a mobile forge mountain there before Christmas, so all know what the anvil is now.
Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, they are familiar with the anvil. But the dipping tank then was another thing, and
that's right. Yeah. Well, you see, in that photograph there, you'll have seen one of the other areas in was after the shoeing of horses was the shoeing of wheels, because wheels were by and large when I was in the 1960s, let's say in 1950s. If you had a cart, and a lot of the transport was done in that time with pony and cart, or horse and cart, or donkey and cart. The wheels of the cart were made of timber, and they had an iron rim around it, so that when you go up now and you look at somebody with a trailer or something like that, they have rubber wheels, But that wasn't the story on farms until well into the 60s, certainly in the around the 1950s, 60s sort of period. It's only then that it became the norm. So that one of the jobs that with people were going to, there are lots of I have photographs of fair days in Ballygar, you'd have the fair day was always the 18th of the month, 18th of the 18th or the following Monday, whatever. If it happened to fall on the Sunday, it would be the following Monday. But before that, there was always a pig fair where people brought their pigs to be sold to people who would buy them for factories and so on. And all those were brought by cart, pony and cart or horse and cart. Or
everything was brought by cart.
Everything was brought by cart.
Yeah.
And if you look at those old photographs, you'll see that the wheels were all wooden wheels with the rim. So the process that they were doing in that photograph there is they were are in the process of putting a rim, a metal rim, onto the wooden wheel that had been probably a new wheel or maybe one that had to be replaced. And that was the procedure.
Sometimes them wheels in the summer with the heat, they would actually buckle and come off. So they'd have to get them redone by the blacksmith to tighten them back onto the cart wheel when they were too hot in the summertime.
So that would be. So that's how my uncles finished up with the forge just outside Ballygar, and the other forge, which is there, was the Fitzmaurices Forge, and they were also connected to me there. That's actually a photograph of I think that one Paul Connolly might have put that up, and I copied that from him. Paul put that up because he got that photograph from a descendant of the Fitzmaurices, a guy called Brian Scanlon. Brian would be living in Dublin now, but he was.
He's actually been in contact with me too.
Has he?
He's posted me down. He said he found another couple of photos. Now I don't know what's in it.
A
couple of blacksmith photos. So I don't know what he's found, but as soon as I have them, I'll send them to you.
He's a great reservoir of
he's so much stuff. So we might be lucky enough to get photos that haven't been seen yet. You know. That was the one way I remember it, or pretty well remember that there. And you can see in that photograph, you can see a horse and cart there. And it's very evident that the wheel is a wooden wheel. So I'll show them there now.
No.
So you see the carts. Do you see it?
See, you might take it close. Pass your request around to him because you see it close up to it there. No, I'm talking too much. Have you questions for me?
No, they're all quiet now. Well, I can go over and back with them, Michael, course, and I can ask the question if there's something they're stuck on, or I can ask you about it.
But the Michael Kelly, my grandfather died in 1952. So I just very
vague
memory of meeting him, but I'm old, but not that old.
Do you have any memories, Michael, of being in the forge, and what do you remember about it?
I do, yeah. Well, I think I sent you a piece there. It's actually
a man sent. Yes, you did.
It was a very interesting piece. Now, I copied it out of the Ballygar area. Parish is Ballygar, Newbridge, and Tohergar. If you know where Tohergar is?
No.
You know where Bandamore Bridge is? Yeah. Well, Bandamore Bridge, near Bandamore Bridge, there's a church called Tohergar Church, and the parish of Ballygar, which is now Ballygar, Newbridge, and Tohergar. Going way back, if you were looking for information about Ballygar, you wouldn't find it, because it was known then as the parish of Killeroran.
Okay. That's Killeroran.
Killeroran. And the Newbridge, if you're looking for Newbridge, it was Killeen. You all know about Killeen, presumably. There's a great sports facilities over there, soccer and so on. Well, that was the parish. It was always the name of the parish as well, Killeen. Tohergar was very interesting because way back it had a Carmelite church in it. Small church there. The ruins of that are still there. Well, very hard to get access to now, but you can get to it, but you need to get permission from the owners of the land to go into it. But it's there. It's quite interesting, hidden away. But anyway, the parish is now known as Ballygar, Newbridge and Tohergar. But they had a historical society back in the 80s. Now, I don't have it anymore. But way back in the 1980s, 1881, 82, and I think it was 89, they published a historical booklets, or how would I call it, on the parish. And one of the key people in it at that time was a man called Paddy Egan. And Paddy wrote an article describing the whole area around where he lived. Now, Paddy Egan was a neighbour of my uncle's, and he wrote about the blacksmith. And he started off, under the spreading chestnut tree, the village smithy stands. Did you ever hear that one before?
Seamus Heaney. No. Who wrote it? Oh, yeah. Is it Wordsworth? Wordsworth.
Yeah.
I know Seamus Heaney has one as well.
He has one as well.
Yeah.
He has, yeah.
Yeah.
But he went the old poem. He says, we rambled off. We went the poem. We rambled off in school. Now I think he meant we rattled off at school rather than rambled off at school. Anyway, that was when we went to go to school. When we used to go to school. Now we used to have to learn all these poems off by heart. But you never have to do that now, presume, do you?
You do.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
Oh, they do. Oh God, I thought that they'd moved away from that. But
no, I'm afraid not.
You've went in.
And it's their favourite, I'd say.
Well, but they'd have no trouble with doing it. So the only difference between that particular smithy or forge, we call it smithy or a forge, and our local is that ours is under the spreading walnut tree. I doubt about the spreading part of it, as it was about the same size 50 years ago. But what a change in activity. All I see now is the door always closed and the front always clean. So that's what you see in the
photographs now, the new one.
New photograph.
Yeah.
Outside, 3 horses, an ass and cart containing a big swingle, a tongs, a grubber, all waiting for the smith's expert attention. Now, what I have to explain what is a swingle, what's a tongs, and what's a grubber. A swingle is if you have a horse. With the horse, you had on the harness and so on. Each side of the horse, you would have a chain coming back, or what were known as traces. They came back to a piece of timber at the back, so left side, right side there. Now, if he wants to pull something, there was on that timber there was also another attachment here to which you attached whatever he was pulling, say the plough.
Yeah.
So the swingle was part of the equipment that was fitted onto a horse.
To attach it to an implement, yeah.
Typically a plough. I can remember, I have some recollection of my father, Lord mercy him, ploughing with horses. When we happened to have a tractor in our family from the early 50s, mid 50s, he did hire work with a tractor and so on. So, but I can still remember ploughing, seeing them ploughing with horses. But tractors came into vogue in the kind of the 1950s. It took over a lot, and so that's why the horses started to decline, and there would have been no less work for blacksmiths in terms of so on.
Yeah.
Tongs was obviously a piece of thing to have in the kitchen. That's where the blacksmith would fix it or repair it, or if it had to be repaired, or even make it. And the grubber was a piece of agricultural machinery for where you'd have rows of potatoes. So in order to keep the weeds under control, you'd pull up and down.
Pull it along, and it would get rid of the
behind the horse.
Over the spuds, like so, to get rid of the old weeds and keep the spuds warm.
Just scuffle it, like scuffling the soil. On the ground, the inevitable heap of horse manure that was always there. Old shoes of every size and shape, old horseshoes of every size and shape, to fit a horse, an ass, pony, jennet, an occasional mule. Old axles, which would be the bear that you have a wheel at one end and another wheel at the other end on the cart or whatever.
Sometimes they had to fix them. Sometimes they'd crack.
Yeah.
The little yolks would crack, and they'd have to fix them.
Yeah. Iron hoops. That's what went on to the wheel. Old sides, A scythe was a piece of equipment that you used to cut grass before you had lawnmowers or anything like that.
Do you know what shape they are? You do. You do.
They were. I used it often in my life. Used them. And what else? He says iron hoofs, old sides mixed with bits of hoof. That was because when they'd be shoeing the horse, they'd trim the hoof of the horse. The hoof it wasn't sensitive. It's an insensitive part of the horse, so there was no pain or anything
attached. Like the horse getting a pedicure.
Yeah.
Getting its nails all done and then getting something attached to it.
Getting a shoe attached.
Shoe attached.
The nails would go down through the hoof.
Yeah.
To attach the shoe to the hoof. A hoof. Sparks flying in all directions. Of course, that was it. The ring of the anvil. You hear the bang on it. It was sort of a musical sound. Michael or Kelly or Johnny shapes the shoe. They were my grandfather or my uncle. The hiss of steam as he cools and toughens the trough of water. Sorry, as he toughens it in the trough of water, so they would work with it and then they would cool it down. You'll see clips of that on television if you often leave sometimes before the news in the evening.
It's steam up. She would have seen that anyway. The day
doing
that
it there with
the man was doing
it. He's making kind of ornamental roses or something like that, and you see him dipping the thing into a trough of water. That is the same effect of it. The pungent smell as he fits the new shoe and freshly pared hoof. Definitely.
Rotten smell.
Yeah.
Because it's hot, you see, and it's going onto the hoof, so it's kind of nearly melting into the nail, so that smell then rises, when they're putting it in.
Yeah.
You can see them going, I'm definitely not going to be far.
You didn't know trouble, you'd be well level for that, don't worry about it at all. He can't talk as he nails the shoe in place because his mouth is full of horseshoe nails. So if you couldn't be looking around and saying, "Oh, grab me a nail from over here," you put 3 or 4 nails
in their mouth.
There's a photograph here. I'll leave you this now because I have a second photograph of them. Where is it? Oh, maybe it's here. Which shows you. This one there, but it shows him showing the horse.
Yes.
See the way he's standing.
Yeah, the foot between his knees.
His knees. So he can't go very far from there if he wants to go looking for nails. So the handiest place to have the nails is stuck. Well, one place maybe he should have them in his pocket or something. But the easiest place to have them was in his mouth.
Yeah.
Because then the shoes are nailed in place, the nails clenched, and the hoofs rasped. That was all part of it. It's very descriptive. It is. Yeah. The reason I brought it up because he really captures it.
Yeah.
Now, and this is a guy. He would have. Paddy was a lovely guy, but he'd have. He like all those people at that time. Primary school education, and then he worked as an insurance broker. I think his wife, I think was from this area, Mountbellew area.
He had a great way with words.
Oh, he had a fantastic way with words, yeah. He heaves a sigh, takes the cap off his head and wipes the sweat from his head and face. 'Tis hard work. But the forge is a regular meeting. There's another aspect of it then. The forge was a regular meeting place, a man's club of a kind. You talk about what they call them now, the men's sheds, where men get together and chat. No women allowed or so on. But that was in those times. This was the equivalent of a men's shed.
And it was warm.
It
was always warm. You see, people's houses were cold.
People dropped in, and if there was anything going on, whether it was no matter what it was. It was known. It was there.
The news
was there. You had no mobile phones. You had no phones. You had no mobile phones. You had no television. You had radio.
No electric.
No electric until the mid
50s. It really came around here. The mid 50s, and not everybody had it either.
Yeah. A great place for news of all kinds of weddings, deaths, births, what time the funeral will be at. The meadow auction. Look for the notice posted on the door. That be if the auctioneers or something were selling meadows or letting land or something, they'd stick a poster up on the door of the forge and to be seen there. And on wet days there was always a crowd there because they could do nothing else. It was a really great place. So that's it. There's more to it there, but I don't want to go on with it. But that's the gist of what the forge
just
is
when
like.
when you said, Michael, there that one of your relatives was an RIC officer and the other, his brother, went to what we think is the World War.
Yeah.
And then you had the Smithy. Do you think there might have been a little bit of conflict there, where they've looked out for one another?
No, what happened to
shipped each other off?
See, when I started doing it into family, I started off doing quite a bit on family history. Well, so I started going through the different branches. There, four grandparents there, each family. So we trying to start out there. So I was dealing with my grandmother's family there. She was Coleman, and when I was researching it, I was myself and my wife when visiting my two uncles, those two men that you see in the photograph there, one day one Sunday afternoon, and just to say hello to them and so on. And we started chatting. Something cropped up about family history. It could well be my wife, because she said she was wondering how much information we didn't have and so on. So anyway, make a good long story short, the two men started telling all the story about my family, and my wife took out a piece of paper actually the diary in her bag, and she took out the diary and she started writing down. So she gave me the diary, so write down this now, there. And I wrote down, and the two men, they could give me precisely everything. The only problem was that I wasn't smart enough to ask more questions.
I know. You don't realise how important it is at
the time. You hear something and you say, oh God, I wish I asked that. But they said, one was in the RIC, the other man went to England, to the UK, and he died there. But I never asked what happened there.
Yeah.
But then, when later on, when they died, we went to the house, and there was a whole pile of photographs there of people, and we're wondering who are these, and so where did they come from? Because photographs were, they're very so important.
Rare. Yeah, especially that time.
So I started researching the story of the Thomas Coleman, and Thomas Coleman joined the RIC, but find that from his records. Then he went up. He was serving as an RIC in Westport. This was in around the year, say, 1900 and between 1899 and 1904. 1904, he got ill. He was in hospital. He was hospitalised in Westport for a spell. And then he resigned or left the RIC at the end of June, I think, 1904. And I didn't know what happened to him after that. And it took me a long time to discover that what happened is obviously he had some sort of a nervous breakdown.
He was hospitalised.
He was hospitalised in Ballygar Mental Hospital.
Yeah.
And here's another.
But see, that's the conflicts and all that. All that was brewing up, and
it would be kind of pre the.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can only speculate as to what actually happened. But he was hospitalised there, and he was there for years until 1918. And the significant thing that happened in 1918 in terms of health was the Spanish flu.
Yeah.
And when it was the same, you've heard mention of it now because of the COVID. People would refer back to, well, there was another kind of major outbreak of health problems. So he contracted the Spanish flu. The Spanish flu got into the mental hospital in Ballygar probably around September, October of 1918. He contracted it, he got pneumonia and he died. That's what happened.
As many of them did. There's no antibiotics or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's only like a flu now. Well, you've all lived through COVID now, so you know exactly what the
but they
pandemic was then in
the
1918.
technology, or they didn't have this information.
No, medicines or anything like that.
How to keep it out of, and it got into it like everything else. It got into places where there was big accumulations of people, gatherings of people.
Yeah. The poor. Because they all lived in cramped conditions. So if it got into the house. you'd be lucky if one of them or two of them would survive out of it, you know.
So that, and then the other son, who was the second in the family, Pat, he went to England, and we have a photograph. We're pretty sure it's him, in an army uniform. We haven't been actually able to pin down where he died, but he was definitely in a regiment of the British Army in England, pre First World War.
Yeah.
Whether he went to,
some of them went out to India, and at that time I know my own great grandfather went off to India.
That would have been with the. No, he that was with the Connaught Rangers, but I have no track of him being with the Connaught Rangers. I think he was with a regiment of Hussars, and maybe that's where he finished up. But that's why my grandmother inherited the farm, or inherited the place. Even though she had an older sister who married, but she married locally in place called.
So she was set up, so they looked after her then.
She was married, and then so it fell back to my grandmother. So when Michael Kelly came back from America, you know, these marriages would all have been arranged. There was no such thing now as going to the disco and finding a nice boyfriend. It was all
for who could have a bit of land and
going to Ballygar.
Marry for money and the love will come. That's what they used to say.
All sorts of
That's the old way.
All sorts of questions about
it was all about survival, really, because if they knew they had some land and he was able to build a forge on it, they'd have a good. Yeah. They wouldn't be extravagant, but they'd be able to feed a family. Yeah. You know, and that's the way they looked at it time. So have you any questions, ladies? No. Are you good? But we'll work through it now in the next couple of weeks, and if you have any questions for Michael, I'll leave you these few notes.
Do.
That'd be brilliant.
That's.